It's really, really fantastic to be here. I've been really looking forward to this, and I feel very honored to be approached to do this masterclass. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to start with the oven. How many people think they can't bake? How many people, okay, why do you think you can't bake? Is there a microphone somewhere?
Hello.
Hello.
Elizabeth. The reason why I thought I couldn't bake because the heat from the oven, I'm always so scared, to light up the oven.
Okay.
The type of oven that we have, you need to use the match.
Okay.
So that really scares me.
So you use a gas oven?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, the reason I always say start with the oven is because a lot of people bake from home. They're home bakers. So because you're a home baker, your oven is very erratic. A commercial oven is very stable, very steady. You can control the temperature better. You can control the humidity better. But a home oven, that's not the case. So what I've done is to test a very erratic oven. Now, some of you might say, what if I don't have an oven thermometer? What I do is that I use slices of bread and I lay them on a tray. I turn the oven to 170 and I leave the slices of bread in for about 20 minutes. And then it comes out. As you can see, the left side is browner than the right-hand side. That tells me this is the hot spot of my oven and this is the cold spot. So when you're baking, because baking is very, you have to be very accurate, you then know not to put your bake on this side of your oven. So that alone will eliminate a lot of erratic bakes. So that's step number one. Step number two, going to equipment, is the type of tin that you use. There are several types. Now, the reason the tin is very, very important is because some tins conduct heat better than others. If you use a very thin aluminum tin, your cake will bake on the outside, but not in the middle. So I find a thick anodized tin with a removable bottom is the best. Also, I look for a tin that has very straight sides. That's really, really important, that it has very, very straight sides. So when your cake rises, the sides are very, very straight, and it looks symmetrical. Also, the oven temperature is very, very important. Certain cakes bake better at a lower temperature than others. Sponges, depending on your oven, between 160 and 180 degrees. Now, to the final thing, if you find that your cake doesn't bake in the middle and it collapses, I use we call it a nail head, a metal nail head. Does anybody know what that is? Yes? No? Okay, it's a metal nail head that we use in making sugar flowers. You can buy it readily from any good sugar craft shop, and you can get it online. So what I do is I pop it in the middle with a flat side in the center. So when you pop out your cake, the nail comes out. And you make sure that the nail is longer than your tin. So that's tip number, what number are we?
3.
Sorry? 3. Excellent. So to start the bake, I need butter, sugar, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So to start the bake, I use a mixture of butter and oil, sugar, eggs, flour. I use self-raising flour, but sometimes I add a teaspoon of baking powder. Here's the problem. When you buy your flour, you look at the expiry date and you think it's within date. But once you open the flour, it's subject to the moisture in the atmosphere. In a certain part of the world, you might even have flour weevils. I'm not mentioning where. You know what I'm talking about. But that's why it's good to sieve your flour. So all this is already pre-done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an all-in-one method. There are two methods. There's one where you cream the butter and the sugar till the mixture is nearly white and very, very fluffy. However, I'm going to do an all-in-one method because of time, and then I'll show you what it should look like and what you do at a certain stage. So here's the flour. It's pre-sifted twice. Then here's the sugar. I do all my dry ingredients first. And then then what I do is I use a wooden spoon and I do a rough mix. But I try not to mix it too much because you don't want the flour to release too much gluten, because there's gluten in flour, and the gluten, the more you activate your flour, the more the gluten is released and the tougher your cake gets. So I will then add my eggs. I then add the butter. And then I'm going to add just a tiny bit of milk. So let's put that on. And then the attachment I'm going to use a whisk attachment.
Do you mind if you take some questions while you're doing all of that?
Yes, please, yes.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Chef Elizabeth?
Okay, so medium.
The lady in the black top. Can we get a microphone to her?
Okay. So start with medium speed to begin with, to get everything combined, and then go on to a higher speed. What's your question, ma'am?
Yes, hello, ma'am. Please, first and foremost, the recipe for the cake you're making,
yes,
wasn't given to us.
Okay.
That's no, not the recipe, the measurement.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The measurements are, and it's so simple, equal parts. So 250 butter, 250 sugar, 250 flour, 4 eggs, and a little bit of milk to begin with. Into the eggs, I've already added, and that's a very important point actually, I've already added the flavoring. And the reason I add the flavoring into the eggs is that once you add it to the eggs, you can beat the eggs and then add that to the whole mixture.
Did that answer your question? Do we have any more questions?
Any more questions? Yes.
Can we get one over here? The lady in the
can
green.
you line the tin? Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah. I can see your cake. It's about 4 steps, including the last one up there.
Yes.
And they are standing erect.
Yes.
In most cases, when you see people bake more than 3 steps,
yes,
the cake will it wants to bend.
Yes.
But I can see you're standing straight. Please,
yes,
what could be the secret?
Okay. There's no secret. At this point, I'm actually going to acknowledge my mom and dad. They're in the audience today.
Can we see mom and dad, please?
No. And also, I'm going to acknowledge a really good friend of the family, Mrs. Ihomu. She's here as well. So you can imagine how nervous I am because I've never baked in front of my parents. However, that's a very good question. The reason I bring up my parents is because my dad is an engineer and he has a phobia of things that are not straight. In fact, if he's going upstairs and the stairs are not even, he will moan about the shoddy workmanship. To get your cake straight, I use a spirit level or a plumb line. I have one to hand. So if you go to a builder and get one of these, so every tier is absolutely level. Now, if you notice, there are 3 bubbles here. So there's one for horizontal, and there's one vertical, and there's one at an angle. Always get a spirit level that has 3. Because if you drop it, and I've dropped this several times, and it's not working anymore, you wouldn't know if you only had the one. So I have about 5 of this at home, different sizes. And also, when I do the cake, I do it lengthwise. So I go all round to make sure it's absolutely straight. So that's the secret. Did that help?
So you're
Excellent.
almost like an architect, you could say.
Absolutely. You've got to be, because baking is mostly science, accuracy, but it's also art as well. Now, on that note, I think this is fine. So we're going to stop this, take this out. And what I've done is that I've lined my tin, or rather, Charity has lined my tin. And what you do is that you get baking parchment. You have one right at the bottom, and then you've got a strip that you've cut at the bottom so it can fit. So we've fitted that in, and that sits in quite well. And then you put your final round on top. And then we put the mixture in the tin. Making sure that it's all in. Scrape the bowl. And then I do something, I bang my tin. I literally drop it 3 times. That settles your mix, and it prevents it from rising and then cracking. And then we've got a preheated oven at 175, and then we're going to stick it in there. Excellent. So while that's baking, we're going to move on to the filling for the cake. Now, in terms of filling, I always use Swiss meringue buttercream. Has anybody heard of that? Yes, a few people? Okay. Normally, there are about 5 or 6 different buttercreams. You've got the English buttercream, obviously, which is icing sugar and butter, equal proportions. 2 parts icing sugar to 1 part butter. Mix everything together. Add a little bit of milk, and we're fine. And then you've got the American buttercream. Sometimes they use shortening, which is white vegetable fat. Again, same ratios. Then you've got Italian meringue buttercream. This is where the egg whites are cooked and then added very, very slowly. You cook the egg whites, then you add very slowly the sugar. But I've gone for a very neutral buttercream called the Swiss meringue buttercream because I love the Swiss. They're very neutral. They don't fight anybody. They're friends to everybody, and everybody gives them money. So I love the Swiss. So for the Swiss meringue buttercream, what we're going to do is my other assistant, who is my sister. Now, as anybody knows, working with your sister is the best experience in the world, right? She thinks she's my boss. And she's always been like that. So we're going to separate out 10 egg whites. So I'm going to do some, and she's going to do some, and she's going to do some. So 10 egg whites, but we're going to keep the yolks because we're going to use the yolks later. And also, I hate waste. I absolutely cannot abide waste. So I'm going to show you something exciting that you can use the egg yolk for. Okay, so that's how many I've done? 4? 4? Yeah, okay. So that's 5. Yeah. And also, be very, very careful with the yolk. Make sure none of the yolk get into the egg white. You can actually buy pasteurized egg white. But the problem is, it's never ever completely free of yolk. So the only way to make sure is for you to do it yourself. But you've got to be very, very careful because raw eggs have sometimes been associated with certain health risks. So never, ever, ever handle raw eggs without washing your hands after.
Okay, Chef Elizabeth, while you're doing all of that, could we get a little backstory on you? I know you weren't always into baking. You were at some point a scientist, some point a headhunter. So can you tell us how you went from doing all of that and making, a cushy salary and then deciding to go on your own, where you created Elizabeth's Cake Emporium, which, by the way, is one of the biggest cake companies, not in London, not in England, but in the world. So can you tell us how you went from that to baking?
Yes. Well, as you rightly said, I started my life as a scientist because being the Nigerian parents that they are, they wanted me to have a bright and secure future. And in Nigeria, there are only 2 careers. You're either a doctor or a lawyer, and the third option is failure. Lawyer, doctor, failure.
We all know about that.
We all know that. We all experience that. And I studied, did my master's. I actually went to University of Lagos. Any Akokites in here? Great Akokites! Great! Great Akokites! Great Akokites! Great! Sorry, I had to do that. I haven't done that for about 30 years. 30, oh my God, oh my God. Anyway, so I went to Unilag. I also went to the College of Medicine. I did my master's there, and then went to England at a very tender age, and then worked as a scientist. After I finished working as a scientist, I trained, I did my fellowship, etc., and then I decided I didn't want to be a lab rat, so went off, did more degrees, did an MBA, did other things, and then I became a headhunter in the city. Sorry, where's my egg white, please? And can I have the sugar? Okay. So to the 10 egg whites, this is 450 grams of castor sugar. Now, if you can't find castor sugar to buy, or if, like me, you think it's unnecessarily expensive, get the normal sugar, which is granulated sugar, and just blend it, and it becomes castor sugar. So just add that, and then get your whisk. Now, the bowl you use to cook your egg white and your sugar, the bowl must be very, very clean. After you wash it and clean it and dry it, if you want, you can also wipe it down with some lemon. Just half a lemon, so that gets rid of the final grease. In this pot is a little bit of water, so we're creating a bain-marie. And put your bowl on top, and then whisk. So back to the story of me, I decided to go into the city and make my fortune as a headhunter without knowing anything about headhunting. And thankfully, it worked out really, really well because my years as a scientist meant that I was a very, very quick study. I could research things, and I found my way of making contacts. And that's the whole point. When you go into a new industry, you go in as a newbie, go in humble, go hungry and eager to learn. And that's what I did. And I started recruiting. I think my first recruitment was a finance director. and I didn't know anything about finance, so I had to learn. And by the end of the interviews, a lot of the candidates thought I'd worked as a finance director before. So anyway, I recruited chairmen and chief executives, very large organizations in the UK. And then the recession hit, as it does. And then I had to leave the job. And also, I reached a milestone age. And I thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So with an old Kenwood mixer, sorry KitchenAid, with an old Kenwood mixer and £10 in the bank, I started my cake business. And I just applied the same principles as a headhunter, which is pick up the phone, call people, email people, and another thing, when I was calling people, I wasn't saying, do you want cake? Because a lot of people try to sell. I don't sell. What you do is when you call, you say to them, I noticed you had an event at XYZ. I noticed that such and such happened. How was the event? Were you very happy with the experience? Are there any areas I can help you with? So I made it all about them. So I wasn't selling my cakes to anybody, although I was selling, if you know what I mean. So anyway, my first big client was the Queen's cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson. And I picked up the phone and I just called. I didn't know that was her company. And there was an intern at the other end. And she said to me, do you make cupcakes? This was about 15 years ago. And I said, of course I do. And I said to her, by the way, I'm going to be in your area in the next 2 days. Can I drop some samples for you? No obligation, no charge. And she said yes. And that was my first proper client. And I remember I got a check for a certain amount. It wasn't very much. I undercharged, as you do when you're new in the business. And it was from a private bank. It was from Coutts. I wanted to keep it, but I was too poor, so I had to cash it. So that happened. Now, as you can see, I know I'm talking, but I'm working as well. I've been stirring this for a while. And I don't know if you can see on camera, it's actually done. Now, normally you would use a thermometer. It has to be above 70 degrees. That's what kills all the bacteria. But a quick way of knowing it's done is if you take a bit and rub it between your hands and there are no sugar granules, then it's done. And constantly stir it, because if you don't stir it, you'll end up with scrambled eggs. So you need to constantly stir. So now that I've done that, Charity, can you please attach the whisk? So again, we're going to use a KitchenAid that's been washed and squeaky clean. And I'm still stirring because the residual heat is still cooking the eggs. And on camera, you can see that it's foaming a little. Excellent. So I'll add that to the bowl. Okay, lovely. So, and we whisk.
Can we take a few more questions?
Yes, please, yes.
Okay. Anybody have, okay, let's do the lady in the colorful top over here.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is to you, Chef Elizabeth.
Yes.
You know, when you put the paste in the pan, and you said you made it go flat, bang on
Yes.
your tabletop.
Yes.
You know, because when I see a baker, the way they go with the cake, they go so easy. So I'm wondering, that will come out from the oven, not going flat. It's not going to fall. Because the way I see we do it here, you know, nice and easy. But now you're saying you can just go bang and put it in the oven, and it's going to come, it's going to stand that way. Yeah, well, I'm not doubting, but I'm just saying.
No. The thing is, though,
how does it really come? What's the secret?
yeah, I don't know how that cake is going to turn out because I don't know what that oven is like. But what will happen is it will come out. It will be cooked in about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the oven. Remember, initially, I explained about ovens and how temperamental they are. Once it's out, it might come out domed, it might come out flat, but what I'm going to show you is how to level it so everything is level.
Okay.
So that's not the end of the story for the cake.
Okay.
When it comes out and it's not level, we level it, and then we fill it, and then we make sure everything is lined up.
Okay.
Okay.
And sorry, one last question. You know, when you were putting in your ingredients in the bowl,
Yes.
because the first time I saw a baker, she measured, yeah, you have answered that, but we had eggs and was it milk mixed in a separate bowl. Then we had, you know, everything was mixed, but you just put yours, you know, like just put one after the other.
That's an all-in-one method. Everything was weighed out, so you can put everything in the bowl and then whisk very high for about 2 to 3 minutes. That's an all-in-one.
Okay.
But remember, you have different types of cakes. This is a sponge. You've got genoise, you've got pound cakes, you've got fruit cakes. So there are several different cakes and different methods. You need to find what works for you, and most importantly, you need to find what works for your oven and for your customers.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chef Elizabeth has said that you can ask her any question at all, no matter
Okay.
how difficult. She
Thank you.
wants the
Yeah.
really, really difficult
Excellent.
questions about
Butter.
baking and about
Butter.
business. So feel free to ask anything at all. This is your chance. Any more questions?
There's some over here. Okay. Thank you. And get
Hello. How do you get the decoration ideas for your wedding cakes?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How do you get decoration ideas for your wedding cakes?
Sorry?
How do you get the decoration ideas for your wedding cakes?
Aha.
Decoration.
How do I get my decoration ideas for the wedding cakes? Normally, I will look at the whole wedding. I love, love, love talking to the bride. I love finding out what they like, what they don't like, whether they like texture, what color they like, what hobbies, what their hobbies are, if they are design aficionados. Sometimes their wedding dress could be an inspiration. For example, this cake, I thought of it when I wrote my book, Opulencia. So this is an Opulencia design. I wanted gold, I wanted swag and drop, which is classic, and I also wanted a crown. And so I drew it, I thought about it, drew it, and I knew I also wanted sugar flowers. And also I wanted the color purple. I don't know why, I just wanted purple. And that's how that particular design was born. So what I've done is create a white and pink version of it today. So I hope
That's
that
a
helps.
beautiful cake. Any more questions? Someone in the back? Something very difficult. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so take it. The
Okay,
lady at
so
the back.
before you ask your question, the egg white is actually fluffing up into a meringue. So it's actually from the liquid that we saw, it's now actually forming into a cooked meringue. So in about 2 minutes, the meringue will be nice and have what we call stiff peaks. Now, when you're doing Swiss meringue buttercream, because it's very hot in here, the buttercream is a bit temperamental. So on days when it's very, very hot in the UK, I would make this at night when it's much, much cooler. So what's your question, please?
Good afternoon, Chef.
Sorry?
Good afternoon, Chef.
Hello.
I'm not into baking, but I'm interested in learning it.
Okay.
But I've been hearing them saying when you bake a cake, you put a preservative. But from what I saw you doing, I didn't hear of any preservative.
Right.
So I want to know. Then a second question is, I will hear them say that some don't like sugar.
Yes.
Is it right you reduce the amount of sugar?
Okay, so you talked about the fact that I didn't use any preservatives. There are very stringent regulations in the UK around preservatives. A preservative is not something I would normally put in a cake, but sometimes some of the biscuits or some of the cakes you buy in shops have got preservatives in them to keep them lasting longer. And there are very strict rules around that in terms of manufacturing. So my cakes don't have any preservatives. So the shelf life will actually be under a week. Chocolate cakes tend to last a bit longer. In terms of sugar, yes, you can reduce the amount of sugar. But if you reduce the amount of sugar, you may need to reduce, other things like butter, etc., because the proportions might be out. But sometimes a very good thing might be to use a sugar-free alternative. So agave nectar, for example, that is a really good sugar-free alternative that I use for diabetics. So the meringue is now, the pan is cooling a bit, and we're getting quite stiff peaks now. So I'm going to start adding the butter, and the methodology that I use for Swiss meringue buttercream is very simple. I call it the 1, 2, 3 method. So 100 mils of egg white, 200 grams of sugar, and 300 grams of butter. So 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to start adding the butter. The butter has melted. Some recommend that you use soft butter, and some recommend that you use hard butter. So I'm going to start adding bit by bit. And in between each addition, make sure it blends for about 10 seconds.
Can we take some more questions while we...
Okay, great.
that?
So I'm going to leave that,
can we
and
take
then
the
we're
lady?
going to move on to the next stage, which is the making of the curd. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Sarah, please, I want to ask.
Yes.
In your business line, have you ever baked a cake? Okay, have a client come to you and said, bake a cake for me, design it your own way. And after you've baked the cake and designed it, people around you love the design, but the particular client said no. What do you do in that?
So let me get the question right. You designed a cake, the client hates the cake, but other people love it.
Love the design.
The person you pay attention to is the client. It doesn't matter if everybody else loves your cake. If the client hates it, that's it, because they're the one paying for the cake. So if I were you, I will go back to the client and I will apologize. And I will also review. And as part of the review, I would ask the client what they hated about the cake. Was it the color? Was it the shape? Was it the size? Was it the look of it? Was it the way it was presented? So I will ask all those questions, from the client. I will also look at my own process. And next time, if the client says to me, design what you like, I wouldn't just take that. I would go back and say, is there a particular color? Is there a particular shape? Is there a particular texture that you like? So that's what I would do. So now we're moving on to the next stage of the process. The buttercream is actually coming along, despite it being very hot in here. And we're now going to make the curd. And the reason we're making a curd is because, remember the egg yolks that we had from the other time? Yeah? No? Yes? Okay. So we're going to use them to make a curd. Does anybody know what a curd is? No? Okay. Yes? Chef knows what a curd is. Now, curds are made using fruit and egg yolk with a little sugar. And the reason I particularly like curd is because you can make it from fruit, which I absolutely adore. My favorite is lemon curd. I also wanted to use produce that was local to Nigeria. So I've done a mango curd, an orange curd, and I've also done an agbalumo curd. I absolutely adore agbalumo. But I was told it wasn't in season. My heart broke. But Chef Tian, please give a round of applause for Chef Tian. She got me the agbalumo. It was later that I realized that she stole it from Chef Raphael. So another hand for Chef Raphael. So tell us the process. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, Chef Charity here, she is going to take us through the process because I set the challenge of an agbalumo curd and she delivered. So she has in here the egg yolks from earlier and a little bit of sugar. So she's going to whip it together because she's much stronger than me. So she's going to whisk it together. And in here is the pulp of the agbalumo here. So it's all been pulped. Obviously, we took the seeds out. And we made sure to check that there were no guests inside. Uninvited guests inside the agbalumo. So she's going to whisk the egg yolk and sugar until it's very, very pale. Now, she can use a hand whisk if she wants to. So if you want to do it at home, you can use a hand whisk. However, she's classically trained by Chef Tian, who makes sure that her students do things the proper way. Last night, at about 9 o'clock, I said, everybody can go. Chef Tian said, no. We're all staying until the work is done. I really admire that work ethic because sometimes people have negative things to say about our great nation, but I was very, very impressed. So as you can see, it's now very, very pale. So she's going to go on to the next stage, which is our bain-marie again. So she's going to turn up the heat because you can't eat raw egg yolks. So she's going to cook everything together. And in the meantime, I'm going to check on my buttercream. Okay, so let me scrape that down. Okay, great. Okay. Lovely. So, yeah. So all I've done is scrape the sides and then whisk again. Okay, great. Okay, lovely. Okay, come and take that out, please, for me. Thank you. Also, I did forget, because I love my country so much, there are certain habits that I take around with me. I love giving gifts. So I've got some cupcakes here for anyone who asks me a very good question. So there was a lady over there that asked about the different types of cakes, about how she saw another chef do another type of cake. Where is she? Okay, that lady, okay. Because I like your smile, you can have a cupcake. Clap for her, don't be jealous.
Can we get a round of applause, please?
And there was another lady over here who asked about preservatives and sugar-free. Where is she? Smiling at me and trying to dodge. I see you. Okay, so Chef has now added the agbalumo pulp into the egg yolk and sugar mixture, and she's cooking it over the bain-marie. How do you know when it's done? No, you tell me. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then it's done. Okay, great. Okay, so chef was explaining that she will cook this over the bain-marie, and she would use a thermometer. In fact, they have a laser thermometer. Laser, not just ordinary. And I said, what about those of us that don't have a laser thermometer? So she said, you take a spoon, and if the mixture coats the back of the spoon and doesn't fall off, then it is done. Then it is cooked. So that's how you know. So it's going to be ready sometime soon. Also with curd, it will thicken. So once it starts to thicken and coats the spoon, then you know it is done. We have some already prepared, which I'm going to pass around if some of you want to try.
Does anyone want to try some?
Guys, curd, I beg you.
Okay, we'll get the ushers to bring them out. No one coming to the stage, please. Not going to make that mistake again.
Okay. So this is mango curd that we made. Does anybody want to try? All hands.
We're going to get the ushers.
Okay. No. Oh, aha. Oh, I don't want to give this away. I thought it was mango. This is agbaluma curd.
Okay, can you give this to somebody to
I must really love you so much. I think we should give some to Chef Raphael as well, since I stole his agbaluma.
We need more than one person.
Okay, that's mango. Any more for agbaluma? Okay. You were very quick. Jack be nimble. Anybody else for agbaluma curd? Okay. Gentleman from the press. The press is my friend. Mommy wants. Should we give mom? Okay. Okay. And let's try mango. What's the verdict so far? Sorry, what did you say? It's amazing. Even if it wasn't, you'll tell me it's amazing. Ma, do you want any more? Okay.
Chef, can we have the ushers do it so we can have you in the kitchen so we can speed up the process?
So just a few more. Okay, so while this is cooking, it's going to take a while. The cakes. Yeah. Okay.
Anybody have any difficult questions to ask the chef? You could get a cupcake.
Okay. Spoons. Just 2 more, and then we want it back, because we're going to use it now.
All right, chef, please, I would like to ask.
So, because of time, these are cakes that we've already done. We've baked them, and they've risen. And as you can see, the lady over there said something about the cakes not being even. That's not a problem. So you tip them out. And as you can see, they came out easily because we lined our tins. Now, some people will, thank you. Some people will rub some butter on the tin and then tip in some flour and flour their tin that way. That's also a good way to do it. But sometimes if you have spots that you've missed, that's not very good. So you take the paper off. Take the paper off. Bin. Knife. Okay. And then ruler. Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the crust. And if you go around, so we have the crust. So I normally use 2 cakes, and then I split the cakes again. And what I try to do is to get them level as much as I can. I normally would use a leveler. There are several commercial ones available. Does anybody know what a leveler is? Yeah? Okay. Just in case you don't, you can actually get them commercially from a very, very simple leveler to a more technical one. So you set the height and then you level. So these look pretty even to me, except that that's a bit risen on that side. So I'll trim a bit off.
Okay, we have
Where's
5
the,
more minutes.
Okay, 5 more minutes. Oh dear. No, the boards. So we split the cake. Split the cake. So you've got 4. Okay, so you've got your buttercream. And I take my palette knife. And in here, I've got some syrups. The syrups are very, very important. I use it to moisten the cakes. Because sometimes some cakes come out very, very dry, depending on the oven. But when I'm baking, if I don't set the humidity, or if I'm using an oven that I don't know, I have a shallow pan of water that I put at the bottom of the oven. So that generates some moisture. So I'm going to add some moisture to the cake, this simple syrup. And I'm just going to drizzle some on the cake. And then make sure I cover the whole surface of the cake. Then get some buttercream. And then add. And then get some of my curd. Now, when the curd is done, the shelf life of an average curd is less than a week. So the best thing sometimes is to prepare the curd fresh and eat it within 2 days. Normally, if you want to preserve it, you get you know the jam jars? You can boil the jam jars, boil them, wash them thoroughly, boil them, and sterilize them, and then you store your curd. And write the date you've made the curd on the jar. And obviously label the jar.
Okay, Chef, we have a few questions off the Facebook page. Could I ask you that while you're busy doing that? Okay. Someone wants to know, what is the secret to a very moist vanilla cake?
The secret, as I've said, is to bake at a certain temperature, put a pan of water in the oven on the bottom shelf so that humidity is generated, and then use simple syrup as well on your cake. So just drizzle some on and make sure it's evenly coated, and that keeps a lot of moisture in the cake.
Okay, awesome. Diola wants to know, how do you get a perfectly straight cake with sharp edges? I think we've answered that question, haven't we?
I hope I get to it because I'm going to show how that is achieved.
Okay, perfect. And last question, can you substitute margarine for butter in the Swiss meringue recipe? And what's the measurement ratio for the ingredients in the agbalumo curd?
We will provide the recipe ratio for the curd underneath the YouTube video later on. And in terms of getting straight edges, I'm going to go to that now.
Perfect, thank you so much.
So to get straight edges on your cake, and this is going to be a whistle-stop demo, I use cake boards. Does everybody have access to cake boards like this? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay, great. So, normally when I fill my cake like this, I love it oozing out. I cover it with cling film and I put it in the fridge. You need to let your cake chill, because if it doesn't chill, it will slide and it won't be straight. So what I do is I make sure I cover and I chill. Once it's chilled, you will have something like this. So this was what we chilled yesterday. And you can see the difference between the one we chilled yesterday. Now, the sides are not very straight. It's a bit lopsided and it's not very even. So this is where these come in. So what I then do with my chilled cake is to move it onto a board like this, and then get my knife,
We have 1 more minute.
It'll take me 1 minute, I promise. Okay, so I get my knife and I trim. I trim the top to make it level. And then what I do as well, because I want this cake to be within the board, I trim the sides as well. So wherever there are bulges, you trim. You trim. Yep. And then I take my buttercream. Yep, buttercream. And then I do what we call a dirty ice. Lovely, thank you. I do a dirty ice on the top. And some on the sides. So at this stage, it looks horrible. It's not particularly attractive, but bear with me.
That's fine. It's time constraints, and I'm sure we all understand that.
So use the turntable to spin and try to get the top as even as you can. And then you take your other board and then I get this. Now this has literally saved my life. On the internet, it's called Glad. And it's like, you know cling film, right? Right. But this is tougher stuff. This is much sturdier. So I cover my other board with it. I trim off the excess.
Chef, we're going to have to start rounding up.
Yeah.
I'm being told by the production team that we're going to start.
One moment. I need literally 1 minute. So I put the other board on top. And then I use my leveler, my spirit measure. So remember the lady that was asking about unevenness? And this is where the fun begins. So you want to get it as level as possible. So if you keep looking at the bubble, it's level there, and then you turn it the other way, keeping this as flat as possible. And it's level this way as well. So once you get it level, okay, great. So got it level, and now you take your buttercream and you do the top edges first. You do the top edges first. Can I have the scraper, please? You do the top edges first. To make sure it sticks.
To hasten the process, Chef, how would you like us to give out
Where's
the
scraper?
cupcakes?
Scraper. No, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. So you then use your scraper and go around the sides. And then you keep adding more buttercream. Because what happens is the two boards provide the outline for your cake. So you keep adding, yeah. You keep adding. Now this is very time consuming because sometimes when you add and scrape, you need to refrigerate in between as well. Then I'm going to scrape. And keep your scraper as straight as possible. And when you scrape off the buttercream, scrape it into a different, scrape it into a different bowl. Don't go back to your original bowl. So as you can see, there are certain divots. So I'm going to add more buttercream into the divots. And I know this is important because a lot of people ask this question, how to get your cakes very, very straight. So once we get to this stage, we refrigerate and then bring it out later to add more buttercream. So if we take this away, yeah, take that away. Lovely.
How much more time do you think we need, Chef?
Sorry, about 5 more minutes?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay, great. Okay, so by the power of TV, here's one we made earlier. So this still needs a final coat and a final scrape. But the sides are much straighter. And because it's been refrigerated, we can add more fresh buttercream. And at last, they found my scraper. Now, one word about the scraper. You want a scraper that is level at the bottom and has a handle. So when you hold it, you can actually see the gap between the scraper, top and bottom, and that indicates where you need to fill. So we need to keep filling and use the power of the turntable and let that do the work. So again, just scrape that into this bowl. So again, keep adding and keep scraping. And like I said, it's a bit messy, but it's worth it because you get a very neat finish at the end. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Unfortunately, we can't take any more questions because we're way out of our time slot.
Okay,
We need to prepare for
so
the next
this will be
class.
our final coat. This will be the final one.
But if there are any questions, is there somewhere that the audience can reach you? Do you have like a social media page where they can
Yes,
send you messages?
I can be reached on Facebook, Instagram. My handle is Elizabeth Cake Emporium. And I'm assuming that when this is put on YouTube, I'll be happy to say